Hello and welcome to this video on Trivium, a collaboration module from Weston Precision Audio and the artist Trovarsi, and this turns any sound source into a comprehensive full synth voice. Here's what's to come. This video is sponsored by Weston Precision Audio, and this video is a free patches series demo, where we distill things down to just 3 examples, patches or scenarios, and in doing so take a little bit more time to explore each patch. As I said at the start, this module is a collaboration between Weston Precision Audio and the artist Trovarsi, and in 12 HP, Trivium offers all you need to make a versatile full synth voice out of any sound source. Most obviously, that might be an oscillator, and there's plenty of controls to shape your sounds. So getting straight into the features, for the audio path, we have an input, and that input either goes into a VCA then a filter, or a filter then a VCA. The VCA has unity gain center detented in the middle, and offers saturation to push more level into the filter, or to saturate the filter's sound. And you select that VCA as pre or post in routing on that switch. The filter is a state variable discrete OTA design that offers low pass, band pass and high pass modes on this switch. There's 2 envelopes on board, an ADSR and an AD or AR envelope. Both of these are activated at the same time via the gate input, and for the ADSR you get CV controls over decay and release, and for the AR or AD you get CV control over that rise or falling stage. This button selects an AD or AR envelope, with the AD working as a complete 2-stage triggered envelope, and the AR envelope working as a rise, hold and release, or rise, hold and fall, attack, hold, release, 3-stage envelope that follows the gate length that you patch in. Both envelopes have their own direct outputs that you can then patch back around the rest of a system. And then we've got some additional flexible routing and CV options here, starting with the VCA that you can select pre or post. You can select whether the level is modulated by the ADSR, the AD, or just for that to hold, keeping that VCA wide open. There's then an additional VCA envelope input, and that's a modulation input, another gain stage, to either modulate the peaks of your envelope dynamically, or to just access direct VCA level modulation. For the filter, we have standard cutoff and resonance controls, both with their own CV inputs for cutoff and resonance, and you get an attenuator there that controls the filter envelope depth. And you can control whether that's modulated by the ADSR or the AD envelope. I've had some great results with Trivium so far, including some amazing sounding acid action, a really nice bass enhancing audio rate modulation patch, making some big kick drums and taking time to really fine tune them, and then also shaping and adding interest to an already complete voice that you might already have. The patches are on screen and in the description for you to skip around, so without further ado, let's dive in. So let's have a listen to some quick filter sweeps here. You'll see me move cutoff, resonance, change the mode from low pass to band to high pass, and the VCA saturation is currently neutral at a more unity-like setting with the center detent. You'll see me push up saturation as well. And here's some pre-filter VCA saturation. Take that post filter That's the sound of Trivium. So in this first patch, we're just exploring Trivium very simply with a single oscillator sound source, maybe one or two extra modulation signals on top of its envelopes, and just creating a voice and a great sound really quickly and easily. And of course with a nice resonant acidic filter, some effects and drums. I'm having a ton of fun. Now, outside of Trivium here, I have the Weston analog drum synthesizer and the Modbap Trinity creating my drum sound, a little bit of drive from the stereo strip, and they're coming into the mix. I can mute the kick just off screen, which I'll do performatively through jamming with this system. But there they are muted, and here's the output of Trivium directly. Now, just to go through an effects trick here before I actually go through Trivium, I'm kicking this into bandpass mode. And I have a split copy on a split cable here to a fully wet reverb on ESU's Trifecta. But there's a high pass filter before the reverb, so I'm treating the high pass almost like a send effect here, whereas I bring the high pass cutoff down, I'm sending more sound into its reverb, and then I can sweep that cutoff up and just let those reverb tails drone by itself. And I really like using filters, be them part of an effects module or separate filters, as kind of effect sends. Choosing to filter in sound into your effects and then letting them trail and taking it away again. But Trivium here, without these modulation signals, this is a saw wave from cycle 5. Any basic analog oscillator would do this job here. 4 per octave to cycle 5, my oscillator, audio into Trivium, and a gate into Trivium, and then this is the whole voice. I have the AR envelope to the filter cutoff, quite a lot of resonance. ADSR to the VCA, but I could hold that open and just have fun with the filter. And the drive there on that VCA too. It's quite nice with the pre-drive. As a kind of alternate colour and alternate saturation, driving that VCA before the filter rather than after. Yeah, that resonance characteristic changes. So adding the ADSR back to the VCA. The first thing I added here was a step sequence to cut off, and I'm attenuating just a modulation step sequence here in an external VCA. It's that yellow trace on the scope. And as I raise its level, patched into the cutoff, again, a really great mix of sequenced modulation and the envelope. If I remove the envelope, there's that sequenced filter cutoff. But together, I think it really shines, works really well. And it's lovely kicking this into bandpass. Getting great resonant throaty tones. Then bringing it back down to low pass again. And doing that with effects and drums just works really well. And the second signal then is patching in a sidechain signal, and we can use the VCA gain input here to do that. If I cancel out these signals and patch into VCA gain here, the sound cuts off. This is normal to 5 volts to keep that VCA gain open, separate to the envelope modulating the VCA as well. So if I use a little utility to add 5 volts to the signal coming into VCA gain, but then add an inverted quarter note envelope, this is side chaining, it's ducking. If I take off the offset and it was a positive envelope, it's just a quarter note decay envelope. But by inverting that, offsetting it, we've got this ducking effect that then when I bring the drums in, it's ducking and sidechaining against my quarter note kick. So that's really it. Oscillator to the input, gate to the envelopes, AR modulating the filters envelope, ADSR modulating the VCA set on these switches, some drive, high resonance, step sequence to filter cutoff, sidechain to VCA gain, and I'm muting the kick, kicking into bandpass, filtering in some effects, and then kind of slamming it all back in. One saw with Trivium, and it sounds ace. So here we're using sub-octaves to impart audio rate modulation for kind of dynamic low end and rich fundamental through Trivium here. And this sound works really well for this kind of growly bass type sound, but coming up a couple of octaves. I think it makes for a really interesting, engaging lead sound as well. Now, removing any modulation here, this Weston oscillator is patching its wavetable output into Trivium. I'm driving the VCA pre, so there's some saturation of these wavetables before the filter. The filter's set to be a high pass, quite resonant, and the output is going into the mix with my effects turned off. I'm using the onboard ADSR to control the VCA, and that's the green trace there if you'd like to see the shape. The yellow trace we'll make use of, which is the AR output. We'll modulate some wavetables with that in a moment. But the main kind of trick here is to use the high pass to cut into that wavetable's fundamental. Hopefully you can hear the difference there. We've lost that low end. But then we're patching into the cutoff through a VCA here. I'll turn this down. You could use any VCA, it's the stereo strip. And I'm taking a sub-octave sine wave through a VCA, just so I can attenuate it here, and patching that to the cutoff. And listen to the difference as I turn that up. We get that sub-audio kind of imparting itself in the low end. If I just pull that cable or say mute it here, listen to how that tone changes. Because it's locked in an octave lower, it's clean musical audio rate modulation. But there's still that bit of grit and life and interest to it. Now that would work well on a low pass filter too. could take off some top end harmonics, and then add some grit and grunge from a sub octave into cutoff. I really like the high pass here, but to get that kind of grit and sub audio rate modulation here, I'm using the ADSR output, green trace, direct from Trivium, to control the level of that sub in the VCA. So hopefully you can hear we get that whoa whoa, it's fading in, just like the notes are with the ADSR from Trivium. And just by fine tuning that high pass, we get a really nice response. Now the slower AR envelope here, or triggered just two-stage envelope, is the yellow tracing cables. That's coming to modulate my wavetable position. And I'm really enjoying the synergy of, I have my oscillator as an input and as an audio rate modulator of the filter, but I have the envelopes controlling level on Trivium and also controlling the waveform that's coming in. It's a really nice pairing of the two modules. So as I mentioned at the start, this works well for lead sounds. If I come up 2 octaves and then just find that nice point in the high pass filtering without the enveloped sub-audio to modulate cutoff. It's a much simpler sound, but with it, we've got that nice kind of ampy saturation, bit of character, and back to bass, and high pass. Effects back in. I think it's a great sound. Wavetables driven in a VCA before a high pass filter. Sub audio rate with a sub octave modulating the filter, but using the envelope that's on board to shape that sub audio modulation, a dynamic modulated modulation. And then using the spare envelope I'm not using for a bit of wavetable motion. Feels just like a really glued together, custom, interesting bit of sound design. So here we're taking a simple sine wave, patching it into Trivium, and creating a kick drum. And we can play around with saturating, huge held low end, push that into tighter, little percussive hits, and then go back to our more shaped, kind of cohesive kick drum sound. Now muting things here. Here's some analog drum synthesizer percussion bits just to back up and fill out the beat. Alongside the kick, I have some echoes here from Isu's Trifecta from the kick. So if I bring the kick in, these filtered echoes are playing off of that kick drum, really adding to that just feeling of rolling around this percussion, kind of gluing everything together. And then I have this wavetable sound that's out of the same oscillator. If you were using a more basic analog oscillator here as your sine wave kick, you could maybe patch a saw wave or a square to do this kind of thing. And I'm patching it into a VCA and inverting the envelope that's playing the amplitude of the kick in the VCA here on Trivium and using that to fade in the sound. There's an offset and an inverted version of this blue trace here fading up this VCA against the kick. You can hear whatever I'm doing here to this envelope. It's bringing in the level of the kick, ducking the level of the synth, and I'm modulating the wavetable with that same envelope. It's led to this quirky whom whum kind of sound that I really quite like. Now pulling out my modulation, I have a gate signal here on quarter notes. There's occasionally an additional eighth note, kind of randomly firing, but quarter note gates, the VCA is set to be pre, so my sine wave comes in, hits the VCA that's saturating here, and then that comes into this low pass filter, and there's loads of saturation if you want it. The VCA is shaped by this ADSR, which is a blue trace here. And And with an ADSR for the level of the kick drum sound, I can set a level on that sustain, say about halfway, and then use the decay almost like a transient shaper, and pushing into saturation. And the longer that decay is, more of that kind of that grit and kind of fluff around the saturation's more evident. But with shorter decays, it's more of a click. You don't hear that obvious kind of saturation. And that works really well. I'm using the onboard AR envelope, which is the green trace here, patched out to modulate FM on the oscillator. If I unpatch that, we just have that sine wave coming straight through. The AR generator is my pitch envelope to the oscillator. The ADSR envelope is the shape of the VCA. And then with the filter, I can just play around with that tone on top of the saturation. If this was all clean, there wouldn't be much to filter because it's a sine wave. So by saturating it and then filtering it, we can really dial in our kick drum sound. Now in terms of kind of performance moves, flicking the VCA into hold is really good for just pushing all this low end through. It's quite fun in a mix and a kind of performance setting. So then a couple of little modulation signals here, which is a gate signal to the attack of the pitch envelope, the AR. And you can see by simply just gating the attack, it seems to kind of delay that AR envelope, giving this nice little rhythmic interruption. And then I'm emphasizing that by modulating the release of the ADSR at the same time, just elongating that envelope. You can see it gives a kind of longer sustain period. It's like it adds a longer gate by sieving in a bit more release on beat 4 there. Without them, consistent sound. And with them, this nice little interruption. So in this third and final kind of example or scenario here, I wanted to take a complete voice, Platts, just a really common sound source, which is why I'm using it here, and it can be a complete sound with its own envelope, its own VCA, its own range of sounds. And I wanted to see if Trivium would offer an existing kind of complete voice anything extra. And of course it does. More envelopes to modulate your patches, feed them the sound that's going through it or to modulate something else, saturation with a VCA and a filter, they're all really useful things. But I'm getting into ideas here of double gating, the idea of taking one sound through a VCA with one rhythm and one envelope into another VCA with another rhythm and another envelope to create interesting kind of double gated rhythmic work. I've got all sorts of filter wobble on top of the sound here, which is a welcome addition to the FM tones coming out of Platts. The Weston hybrid wavetable oscillator here gives us this high kind of saturating, almost like guitar amp feedback like pad for a load of effects. And there's some extra drums here from Weston and from Trinity. Let's mute all those though and listen to the dry, plain output from Platts. So here's Platts output here in a split cable, just dry into the mixer. It's been triggered with its own decay envelope, its own VCA, kind of low pass gate emulation. A couple of LFOs coming in, and some sequenced harmonic changes over these FM sounds. Now that, against a beat, works. It's a complete voice. And I like FM tones, so I think it's quite an interesting sound. But by taking this out of this split cable into Trivium, and then coming out into the mixer here, let's mute this and unmute this. Saturation, movement, filter wobble, way more low end being kind of pushed and pulled around. and some sidechain ducking. Let me remove the modulation here and we'll just go through the sound as is. If I hold open the VCA, there's that plat sound coming through, and we can push into saturation. What's quite interesting is using the envelope rather than the hold to control the VCA, and I'm playing this just with eighth notes. So I have my rhythmic pattern from plats and then just straight eighths here. So we're imparting this wob, 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 this kind of pulse onto the existing kind of shuffling, interesting rhythm. I'm inverting the AR envelope here. With a lot of resonance on that low pass, giving us a little bit of movement and push and pull. I'm then using an offset voltage into VCA envelope. It's like an extra VCA gain stage with an inverted envelope that's ducking against my kick. So it's just pulling away, giving room to that kick drum in the mix. Without it, that boom, 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 boom. The first beat of the bar, a bit kind of clouded and muddy in the low end. So just tucking in a little inversion there. Little duck against an envelope works really well. Finally, another triangle LFO to the cutoff. Got all this kind of loosey-goosey, almost like auto wah, squelchy filter stuff. I think it works really well, especially against the beat. So one rhythm to plats, an eighth note straight rhythm kind of imparted on top of it, putting this pulse in there, playing against that hi-hat for example. More filtering, drive from the VCA. And then just a droning kind of ambient pad out of the wavetable oscillator here. If you've got this far in the video, drop an acid sync down in the comments. And there's loads more for me to explore than just these 3 or 4 patch examples here, and I look forward to doing so in the future. Head to patreon.com/DivKid to support us, gain access to exclusives, and to join the DivKid Discord community. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!